He was a self-made billionaire. He gave his wife and children everything, except the one thing they wanted most, his death. When he pretended to be dying, he thought he'd see fear, love, or even sadness. But what he heard instead was his family quietly planning how to speed up his final days. They weren't just waiting for him to die. They were organizing it. They had meetings. They had lawyers. They had timelines. But what they didn't know, he wasn't dying. He was listening. And he was planning. And the day he walked into their secret goodbye meeting, healthy, strong, unstoppable, everything they thought they owned died instead. This is the story of how a billionaire faked his illness and discovered who his family truly was. Well, this is my story. Let me tell you how it started. I knew something in my family had rotted long before I decided to fake my illness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I heard the night I pretended to come home weak, exhausted, and dying. I walked into my own mansion with a slow, unsteady step, holding the fake medical file the doctor and I had prepared together. Stage 4 pancreatic failure. 6 months left. It was all a lie, of course. I'm 54, fitter than most men half my age, and built my wealth one sleepless year after another. But I needed to know the truth. After decades of providing everything, I needed to see if my family cared about me or only the lifestyle I created for them. I didn't even make it past the foyer before I heard my wife's voice drifting from the study. 6 months? That's too long, she whispered sharply into the phone. Tell the lawyer we need the papers ready sooner. If he gets worse faster, we can request emergency control. My heart didn't sink. It slammed. I moved quietly, my hand tightening around the file. I recognized my son's voice next. Deep, irritated, impatient. Mom, calm down. As long as the old man signs the authorization forms, we'll handle it. I want the companies divided before he gets sentimental and leaves something to charity. My chest tightened. My own son calling me an inconvenience. I stepped back, barely breathing, but the walls of that house, the house I built brick by brick, betrayed them. Every word echoed. Then my eldest daughter spoke, her tone cold, businesslike. Can we agree on who's getting what? I want the real estate branch, and I don't care what Dad promised. Promises don't matter when someone's dying. My younger daughter let out a bitter laugh. I want the trust funds, and his car collection. If he's too weak to drive, he won't miss anything. Weak, dying, obstacle, asset. That's all I was to them. I stood in the shadows of my own hallway, listening as the people I loved plotted how to carve me up like a turkey at a holiday table. Not a single word about helping me, comforting me, spending time with me. Only urgency. Urgency to dismantle my life before my heart even had the chance to stop. At that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt something colder than betrayal. I felt hunted. And the worst part? The illness was fake. But their greed was real. People look at me today and see a billionaire. Sharp suits, private jets, a name printed on glass towers. But I wasn't born into wealth. I wasn't handed anything except a sick father, a mother who worked double shifts, and a childhood full of empty refrigerators and eviction notices. I was 17 the first time I promised myself I would never depend on anyone again. And I kept that promise. Every penny I earned, I fought for. Every company I built from the ground up. Every success was paid for with sweat and bone, not inheritance or luck. I met my wife, Helena, when I was 28. Back then, I had nothing but potential. She was warm, soft-spoken, funny in a gentle way. We married quickly, too quickly maybe, but at the time I thought speed meant fate. I believed love was enough, and for a while it was. She stayed with me through the first grind years, the cheap apartments, the nights when I slept on the office floor, the meals consisting of instant noodles and burnt coffee. When the money finally came, it came fast. Deals closing, companies forming, opportunities multiplying like wildfire. But somewhere in that rise, something in Helena shifted. Responsibility turned into comfort. Comfort turned into entitlement. And entitlement turned into expectation. Our oldest daughter, Olivia, grew up watching the wealth accumulate. She inherited her mother's charm, but none of her early humility. Brilliant, yes, but sharp in all the wrong places. She always spoke as if the world owed her something simply because she existed. When she was 14, she told me she didn't need to study because Dad is rich enough for all of us. I laughed then. I shouldn't have. My second daughter, Bella, was different at first. Softer, sweeter, the kind of child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after dinner. But luxury corrodes quietly. By the time she turned 20, she cared more about social status than sincerity. Everything became a performance. The designer clothes, the curated friendships, the exaggerated stories about her difficult upbringing, when in reality, she never wanted for anything. And then there was my son, Leonard, the heir I had hoped would walk beside me, learn the business, understand the weight of responsibility. But he grew up idolizing the empire, not the man who built it. He liked the cars, the houses, the influence. But early mornings? Long meetings? Tough choices? No, those were beneath him. He liked calling himself my successor, but in practice, he had the work ethic of a houseplant. I don't say any of this with anger. I say it with regret, because I was the one who created the golden cage. I was the one who confused providing with parenting. I gave them everything except the one thing they needed most, boundaries. Over the years, the small things piled up. The tone of their voices when they asked for money. The way they treated staff. The way they spoke about people with less. And the worst part, the way they spoke about me when they thought I wasn't listening, like I was a walking ATM, a resource, not a father. I knew they were drifting away emotionally, but I didn't realize how far until the day I pretended to receive my diagnosis. A trusted doctor, someone I had supported for decades, agreed to help me test my family's loyalty. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to know the truth. I needed to see if any love remained beneath the layers of privilege. When I told them the news, their reactions cut deeper than I expected. Olivia didn't cry. She simply asked, "So, what happens to the companies?" Bella hugged me lightly, the kind of hug you give to a stranger, and whispered that she'd manage everything. For me, Leonard had the nerve to look relieved. And Helena, she touched my arm gently and told me we would get through this, but her eyes were scanning my expression, calculating. I knew that look. It was the same look she used when choosing handbags. That night, lying alone in the bedroom I once shared with her, the decision formed quietly in my chest. I needed to see who they really were when they thought I was fading. I needed to see if anything genuine still lived in that house. And what I discovered was worse than anything I had imagined. The first sign that something was terribly wrong wasn't what they said. It was what they stopped saying. In the days after I announced my diagnosis, my family moved around the house like actors reading from a script, soft voices, exaggerated pity, tight hugs that lasted 1 second too long. But behind the warm smiles, there was a stiffness, a tension, a waiting. The way you wait for a package to arrive. The way you wait for someone to leave. I could feel it. The betrayal began slowly, like a cold draft slipping under a locked door. On the third day, I overheard Helena talking to someone on speakerphone in the master bedroom. I stood outside the slightly cracked door, listening to the sound of paper rustling, her voice controlled and professional, a tone she hadn't used with me in years. "Yes, but can we request a fast track? His condition is unstable." A lawyer's voice murmured something back. "I understand," she sighed. "Send me the forms. I'll get his signature while he's still capable." Capable. My wife of 26 years was talking about me as if I were already mentally gone. The woman who once held my hand through bankruptcy was now preparing to take power of attorney before the ink on my fake diagnosis was dry. I walked away before I heard more. Some truths come slowly. Others hit you in the chest like a hammer. The second blow came from Leonard. I had left my office door slightly ajar on purpose. Something inside me wanted to test him further, see how far he would go. I watched from the hallway as my son, my only son, slipped inside the room like a thief who already knew where the valuables were. He went straight to my desk. He didn't hesitate, Every drawer, every folder, every locked compartment. He was searching for documents related to company ownership, share distributions, overseas accounts. He took pictures with his phone, fast and practiced, as if he had rehearsed this. At one point, he grinned. Actually grinned. When he left the office, he looked lighter, almost pleased with himself. If I hadn't been holding the door frame, I might have fallen. But I wasn't done discovering things, because betrayal rarely walks alone. Later that evening, Bella came into my room with a bowl of soup she obviously hadn't cooked. She sat beside me, stroked my arm, and asked gently, "Dad, do you remember where the safe key is? You know, in case your memory gets worse." My memory. She asked me about the safe key the same way you'd ask a stranger for the time. No tremor in her voice. No emotion. Just the careful politeness of someone trying not to spook a dying horse. When I didn't answer, she smiled, that rehearsed, practiced smile, and said she would help organize my affairs. Then she left before the soup even cooled. As for Olivia, her betrayal was quieter, but far more calculated. 2 nights after the diagnosis, I checked the security footage from the hallway camera. I watched her slip into my study after midnight with gloves on, open my filing cabinet with a hairpin, and remove 3 documents. My living will, my asset distribution chart, and my updated will draft. She photographed everything, put the files back, wiped the cabinet handles, and walked out as if she'd done this 100 times. I pressed pause on the video. My daughter, the first person I ever held as a newborn, the one I used to carry on my shoulders during beach vacations, the girl who used to cry when I had business trips. Now she was a stranger wearing her face. But the deepest betrayal, the one that made my skin crawl, happened on a night when they thought I was asleep. Helena invited all 3 children into the living room. They sat together like a secret committee. Olivia started. "We need to secure everything before he gets worse. The moment he loses mental capacity, everything gets complicated." Leonard added, "He's still strong. We have to push the paperwork through fast." Then my wife said something I will never forget. "He's suffering. It might be kinder to prioritize comfort care. If his decline accelerates, well, nature decides the rest." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was agreement. They weren't planning to just inherit. They were planning to let me die. Not kill me, no, nothing that direct. But to nudge me toward the edge, to shorten the timeline, to let nature do the dirty work while they organized their future. My blood turned to ice. For a moment, I forgot the illness was fake. My mind filled with images of them hovering over my bed, smiling sadly as they whispered, "He's in a better place." Couldn't breathe. I left the house at midnight, went to the guest house behind the pool, and locked the door. My hands shook as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. A healthy, strong man. A man who could run 5 miles. A man who could lift weights, negotiate deals, build empires. But inside, I felt like a corpse they were already dividing. By the 5th day, I realized something horrifying. They loved my money more alive, but they needed me gone to truly own it. That's when the fear ended, and the cold, controlled fury began. For the first time in years, I saw my family without the soft filter of hope. I saw them as they truly were, entitled, hungry, impatient, and frighteningly coordinated. They weren't children anymore. They were adults who had learned to sharpen greed into a skill. And I had allowed it. I stood in the silence of the guest house, staring at my reflection. The man looking back wasn't weak. He wasn't dying. He wasn't fading. He was a man who had built empires from nothing. A man who had negotiated with people far more dangerous than his own family. And I whispered to myself, if they want a dying man, I'll show them what resurrection looks like. That moment, that exact breath, was when things began to turn. The next morning, long before the mansion woke, I drove to the private office I'd kept hidden for decades. A small penthouse floor above a commercial building downtown. Only 3 people knew about it. Me, my oldest business partner, and the lawyer who had helped me structure my first company. It was my sanctuary, my backup, my fortress. I sat at the polished black desk and opened the secure safe built into the wall. Inside was my insurance on the world. Encrypted ledgers, backup contracts, alternative ownership structures, ironclad trusts, documents that could collapse or protect entire companies with a single signature. I had built all of this quietly, long before the family grew entitled enough to threaten me without saying the words. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Continuity Plan, a plan I never thought I'd have to use. My phone buzzed. It was Henry, the only man I ever considered a real brother. We built our first business together at 19, before branching into separate industries. I picked up immediately. "You sound like hell," he said. "My family wants me dead," I replied calmly. Silence. Then Henry exhaled. "Tell me everything. I'm already driving." By the time he arrived 40 minutes later, I had played the audio recordings, shown him the footage, the messages, the plans they made behind my back. Henry's face darkened with each minute. "You can't stay in that house," he said. "Not one more day." "I'm not," I told him. "But I'm not running either." And that became the turning point. I wasn't simply escaping, I was preparing. Together, we activated the emergency strategy my lawyer had once advised but I had never implemented fully. A plan built not for physical survival, but for financial immortality. Step 1. Transfer control of every major company into a sealed trust. A trust that required my consent only. Step 2. Freeze internal accounts. Anything my son touched would trigger automatic alerts. Step 3. Rewrite the will, leaving my entire empire to a philanthropic foundation under strict rules. My marriage and children were still referenced, but only symbolically. They were not beneficiaries. Step 4. Relocate liquid assets. Quietly, legally, no trail they could access. Step 5. Prepare the exit. A new penthouse, a new number, a new attorney team, a clean cut. By late afternoon, everything was in motion. When I stepped outside to get some air, my mind finally quieted. No fear, no anger, just a deep, cold, steady resolve. On the walk back to the elevator, I made one more call, the most important one. A woman answered. Her voice was soft, warm, familiar in a way I hadn't felt in years. We had met months earlier at an investor conference. Back then, I forced myself to ignore the connection. I was a married man, even if my marriage felt more like a business merger gone cold. "Is something wrong?" she asked. I swallowed. "I need help," I said quietly, "and I don't trust anyone in my house." She didn't hesitate. "Tell me where you are." That was the moment the world shifted again. Not because she saved me, but because she cared without knowing the details, without asking what she could gain. Something my own family hadn't done in a very long time. The morning of the confrontation felt unnaturally calm, the kind of calm you feel before a storm that tears roofs off houses. I woke up in the guest house, showered, shaved, and put on a charcoal suit tailored back when my wife still looked at me with pride instead of calculation. I looked fit, healthy, powerful, the opposite of dying. Today was supposed to be my final family meeting, planned by them, orchestrated by them, meant to prepare for my passing. In truth, they had no idea they were walking into their own funeral, the funeral of every illusion they had about who I was. I entered the main house just as the sun edged through the tall windows. Helena, Olivia, Bella, and Leonard were already in the dining room. Papers were spread across the long marble table. Legal documents, asset lists, my medical file, the fake one. They froze when they saw me, not because I looked sick, but because I didn't. I took the head of the table, my seat, and watched each of them try to hide the flicker of unease in their eyes. Helena spoke first, her voice soft and rehearsed. "Darling, we didn't expect you to be up this early. You should rest. You're pushing yourself." I held up a hand. "Sit." She did. They all did. For the first time in years, they obeyed without question. I placed my phone on the table and pressed a button. A recording played. Helena's voice. "He won't last long. Tell the lawyer to expedite the transfers." Every face at the table went pale. I pressed another button. Leonard. "We need him to sign before he loses capacity. If he gets worse, it'll complicate everything." Bella swallowed hard. Olivia's jaw tightened. And then, the final blow. Helena again. It might be kinder to prioritize comfort care. If his decline accelerates, nature decides the rest. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Olivia finally tried to speak. Dad, we were scared. You misheard. No, I said quietly. I heard you perfectly. I stood and opened the leather folder I'd brought with me. Their eyes latched onto it instantly, like vultures spotting a carcass. But it wasn't my carcass lying before them. It was theirs. I've spent the last week documenting everything, I said. Every message, every recording, every visit to lawyers behind my back, every attempt to seize control while pretending to care about my health. I tossed the folder onto the table. Pictures, transcripts, and legal notes spilled out. You didn't just prepare for my death, I said. You prepared to profit from it. And here's the part you never expected. I was never dying. Not for a single second. I faked the diagnosis because I wanted to see who loved me and who loved my money more. Leonard shot up from his chair, face red. This is insane. You're manipulating. Sit, I said again. To my shock, he did. I looked at my wife, the woman I once loved enough to give half my life to. You were planning to have me sedated, make decisions on my behalf, sell the companies I built with my bare hands. For what? More comfort? More jewelry? More of a life you contributed nothing to? Her lips trembled. I was trying to help our family. You weren't helping, I cut in. You were circling. My daughters sat stiffly, almost frozen. Olivia was the first to break. Dad, please. We were overwhelmed. The diagnosis scared us. We made mistakes. You made plans, I corrected. And now you'll face the consequences. I reached into my jacket and laid a thick stack of documents on the table. These were signed yesterday, I said. Every asset, every company, every investment, every property has been transferred into a private foundation with a sealed trust. A trust with only one living person authorized to manage it. They leaned forward instinctively. I leaned back. That person is me. Their faces cracked. Confusion, denial, panic, all mixing into something ugly. Olivia gasped. What about us? What about you? I asked, genuinely curious. What have any of you done to deserve the life you enjoy? What have you built? What have you sacrificed? What have you protected? No one answered, because the answer was nothing. You weren't cut out of the will because of what you did this week, I added. This week only revealed who you've been for years. Helena's voice cracked. You can't just walk away from your family. I stared at her. Family? You stopped being my family the moment you discussed my death like a business transaction. I slid a final envelope across the table. Inside are copies of the divorce papers being filed today, I said, along with notice that you are no longer a board member, trustee, or beneficiary of anything I own. Her breath hitched. You're ruining us. No, I said calmly. You ruined yourselves. My daughters tried to speak at the same time. Dad, we can fix this. This is a misunderstanding. We didn't mean. I raised a hand. Enough. None of you cared whether I lived another month. You cared whether my money would. Leonard snapped again. You can't leave us with nothing. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You almost left me with nothing. Not even dignity. He went silent. For the first time in his life. I walked toward the door. No one followed. No one moved. They just stared at me, at the documents, at the burning wreckage of their own greed scattered across the table. As I reached the doorway, I turned one last time. You should be grateful, I said. I didn't give you what you gave me. They looked confused. I clarified. I spared your lives. Then I walked out of that mansion, the same mansion they had tried so hard to claim, and I didn't look back. Not once. Not even when the shouting began behind me. Not even when the calls started flooding my phone. Not even when Helena fell to her knees in the driveway begging. Because in that moment, for the first time in years, I was truly alive. If you love powerful stories of betrayal, hidden truths, and justice that strikes when no one expects it, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. New stories drop every single day, darker, sharper, and more unforgettable than the last. Now, back to the story. I got into my car and didn't go to a hotel or one of my company apartments. I went to the penthouse, the one I had quietly purchased when I realized I needed a life outside the walls of that house. The elevator opened into a space filled with warm afternoon light and the faint smell of new beginnings. Hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city I had built my dreams in. Silence, but not the cold kind that my mansion had turned into. This silence felt like possibility. A soft knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, she stood there, the woman I had called during the turning point. Her name was Clara. We had met months earlier, both of us attending a financial conference. She was intelligent, warm, grounded, the kind of woman who listened with her whole face, not just her ears. But now, standing at my door, she wasn't someone I needed romantically. She was someone who cared enough to show up. She didn't ask for details. She didn't reach for my wallet or my name or the title in front of it. She simply said, "I brought you dinner. I thought you might not have eaten." That one simple act broke something in me, not in a painful way, but in a way that finally let the light in. If stories of betrayal and hidden truths keep you thinking long after they end, click the story showing on your screen now.